We've come to the Cotswolds to get some great landscape shots while these spectacular lavender fields are in full bloom. This gives us a great opportunity to demonstrate depth of field, which is one of the most important creative options in all types of photography, and for landscapes in particular. Depth of field is the range of sharp focus in front of and behind your main subject. With shallow depth of field, the background quickly goes out of focus. This is great for shooting portraits, for example, where you want to concentrate attention on your subject. But in landscape photography, the whole scene is your subject, and you want as much depth of field as possible to make sure everything in a picture is sharp, from the flowers and stones at your feet to a distant tree line on the horizon. A number of factors affect the depth of field. The focal length or zoom setting of your lens is one. A wide angle setting will give more depth of field, while a telephoto setting will give less. Let's see this in action. We've placed India in the middle distance for these early examples to help show the difference these settings make. If we zoom right in, you can see our subject is sharp, but the background is out of focus. But if we zoom out, everything is sharp, from the foreground right into the distance. Depth of field is also affected by the lens aperture. The easiest way to control the lens aperture is to set the camera to A, or aperture priority mode. Now you turn the main command dial to choose the aperture setting. This is displayed either on the status LCD on the top or the main LCD on the back of the camera. This shot was taken at the maximum lens aperture at this focal length, which is f5.6, and you can see that both the background and the plants in the foreground are out of focus. But if we take the same shot at f16, everything comes out sharp. Let's try this out. We'll use a tripod because using small lens apertures means slower shutter speeds, and we don't want to risk camera shake. A tripod also gives us time to think carefully about the composition. This shot works well because we've got a combination of foreground interest, the lavender plants closest to the camera, the converging lines created by the rows of lavender, and a building in the distance. This gives the picture depth and interest. So what do we focus on? The plants in the foreground or the distant horizon? As it happens, neither. If you focus on one or the other, you're not going to make the most of the available depth of field. Here we focused on the lavender in the foreground, but the distant building has gone out of focus. And if we focus on the building, the foreground's out of focus. What you need to do then is focus between the nearest and farthest objects. Picking a precise point is not easy, but in this situation, focusing about a third of the way up the frame will help us to maximize depth of field. There are two ways of doing this. Once you've chosen your focus point, you can switch to manual focus and turn the focus ring until that part of the picture is sharp. Or you can leave the camera set to autofocus, but manually position the focus point over this spot. You can do this using the viewfinder, or if you find it easier, you can switch to live view mode. Here you can use the multi-selector to place the focus point exactly where you want it. So how do you know what lens aperture to use to get sufficient depth of field? Older non-zoom lenses had index markers on the distance scale which would indicate the depth of field at any given lens aperture. But this isn't practical with zoom lenses because it changes with the zoom setting. You can download and print depth of field tables from a website like www.dofmaster.com, but these are quite complicated, and a more up-to-date solution is the depth of field app for your smartphone or tablet. Here, for example, we can tap in our zoom setting and focus distance, and the software will tell us the near and far limits of the depth of field. This is still quite complicated though, and there is a simpler solution. The most efficient way to use depth of field for landscapes is to always have the distant horizon at the far limit of the depth of field. So all you really need to know is where to focus and what lens aperture to use to make this happen. This focus distance is called the hyperfocal distance, and it's going to be a fixed number for any combination of focal length and lens aperture. Let's try it out here. We're using a focal length of 55mm and a lens aperture of f16. Our app tells us that our hyperfocal distance is 9.5 meters for my DX format camera, and the depth of field will extend to around 4.7 meters in front of the camera, from exactly half the hyperfocal distance in fact. That's all we need to know. If you have a lens with no distance scale, such as the Nikon 18 to 55mm VR kit lens, you need to estimate the distance visually. But if you have a lens with a distance scale, like this 18 to 300mm, you can be a little more precise. You can download and print hyperfocal distance charts to take with you the next time you go shooting landscapes. But to make it easier, we've included one with this tutorial in issue 11 of nPhoto.